Well, some on the left appear unwilling to cool the political rhetoric even after the third assassination attempt on President Trump, this time during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So Jimmy Kimmel, he is refusing to apologize after critics said he crossed the line, joking about Melania Trump becoming a widow. Instead of walking it back, the late-night host turned the tables on President Trump.
It was a very light roast joke about the fact that he's almost 80 and she's younger than I am. It was not, by any stretch of the definition, a call to assassination, and they know that. I've been very vocal for many years speaking out against gun violence in particular, but I understand that the First Lady had a stressful experience over the weekend, and probably every weekend is pretty stressful in that house. And also, I agree that hateful and violent rhetoric is something we should reject. I do, and I think a great place to start to dial that back would be to have a conversation with your husband about it.
So Democratic leaders are also digging in. J.B. Pritzker is standing by his Trump-Nazi comparison, and Hakeem Jeffries doesn't see what the big deal is about his use of the term maximum warfare to describe Democrats' redistricting efforts.
I stand by it. You can continue to criticize me for it. I don't give a damn about your criticism.
You compare the Trump administration to the rise of Nazis.
What I was talking about was the fact that a constitutional republic was torn apart in 53 days in Germany in the 1930s, and that we need to watch out for that in this country. Over the last year, much of what I said has been proven to be true.
And radio host Charlemagne the God is also pointing the finger at President Trump.
People always say, so are we going to tone down the violent rhetoric towards Trump? Stop it. Like, I'm sick of that narrative. I need every single media personality to direct that energy and that question towards one person and one person only, and that person is President Donald J. Trump. At what point do people simply say, hey, Trump, it's clear that you're the drama?
Tyrus, unity lasted 2 hours.
Yeah, actually an hour 45. There was probably fighting over the extra wine bottles on the table. I think the one thing is, like, we no longer have to ask the question of where everyone's at. They're never going to accept the president as their president, so they will be opposition. Whenever things like this happen, you go to them and we're always shocked by the answer. At some point, that's insanity on our part. If anything that happens, what was it? The first thing that came out was it was fake. It was that Rosie O'Donnell one. Why are we even wanting to hear what she has to say? We already know what she has to say. Joy Reid, we already know. We already know that no matter what, they're never going to back down. One, there's no consequences. Most politicians have that qualified immunity, so they can say all kinds of things and never be. Take away qualified immunity, then maybe people would start toning things down on both sides. But that both sides thing has become now another loose term like racism and affordability, and it's just, at least Hakeem, he's owning it. He's telling you exactly where he stands. And I would rather, at least I know where they stand now. It's no longer a half apology, half answer. They're looking you dead in the face saying, nope, we don't have a problem with this.
Kaylee, what do you think?
Look, when I look at what Democrats have said, we could fill a whole hour with them saying, more than an hour, a threat to democracy. But I want people to realize what a serious thing that is. At the bedrock of American society is democracy. Without democracy, America simply does not exist. So they're saying that Trump is a threat to the very bedrock of society, and that is dangerous. When I hear J.B. Pritzker double down on a Nazi comparison, I mean, the Nazis killed millions of Jews, and you are literally comparing the duly elected commander-in-chief to Nazis who killed millions of Jews. It is so deeply irresponsible. And then you get the double down. I mean, to your point, it'd been barely 2 minutes, and here you have Hakeem Jeffries saying maximum warfare. I stand by it. I don't give a bleep. I mean, we had Charlie Kirk, who was killed. We have had 3 assassination attempts on President Trump. Lee Zeldin was targeted. Russ Vought at the White House was also targeted. They went after the guy who wanted to take him out. Kavanaugh was targeted. Steve Scalise was targeted. How many more names do we have to put forward, either attempts on their life or threats to their life, before we realize there is an endemic problem on the left? And it is on the left. I know Jessica will try to dispute that, but there's polling, and you can see it in the YouGov poll. Is violence for political purposes ever justified? Do you want to know what very liberal people say? 25% say yes. Do you want to know what very conservative people say? 3% say yes. 3 and 25 are very different. Then you go down to just liberals. 17% say, yep, that's okay sometimes. Among conservatives, 6%. There is a disparity in the polling, and if you don't believe YouGov, walk on over to Rutgers, where 55% of self-identified left-of-center respondents surveyed indicated that murdering President Donald J. Trump would be somewhat justified. We have data to underscore there's a problem. There's a generation of left-wing radicals being raised, and we got to fix it. And it means that the very liberal people in the party need to stand up and say, my very liberal cohorts, this is unacceptable. And I'm waiting for that moment.
And Jessica, I don't know if well, I mean, I guess it's kind of the B block as well, but I'm not sure so much as it is elected leaders, but it's also very online on the left. And I think that's where, when you look at the shooter's thinking and his reposts and everything, that it's not so much that he's watching what Josh Shapiro or Hakeem Jeffries are saying, or even Pritzker. It's more almost on the extreme left.
Well, it's the hours of content that's being pumped out and the clicks that pay people's bills and these algorithms that are absolutely rotting our brains, that continue to feed you more of the incendiary things that you've already clicked on once. I notice it as I'm streaming through Twitter. If I even pause for 2 seconds on a tweet, suddenly I'm fed more stuff that takes me down that particular rabbit hole. And that's definitely where a lot of the radicalization comes from. I just feel like this is a massive gaslighting scene. I mean, the Hakeem Jeffries comparison, I think, is so unfair. He's talking about redistricting. He's not talking about a human being. He's certainly not talking about a Republican. And you say, Democrats went out and called Donald Trump a threat to democracy. Absolutely. The guy still doesn't accept the 2020 results, and a majority of the party doesn't, as a consequence of the fact that he continued to proliferate that lie. The language, part of the being the most important person, certainly in the country and arguably in the world, is that you have great responsibility to set the tone. And Republicans who are out there criticizing Democrats right now are the ones who run from reporters in the hallways when Donald Trump has done something absurd, like celebrate Rob Reiner's death, or say, Bob Mueller, good riddance, whatever it is. And you say you can run through things Democrats have said. Donald Trump, enemy within, communists, Marxists, fascists, radical thugs, vermin, garbage, traitors, sick, party of hate, evil, and Satan. You're right about that data. It's disturbing. But the more important data to this is what's come out from Cato, which is where the violence is actually coming from, checking exactly the cause. There has been an uptick in left-wing violence. Absolutely, it is an issue. I want to solve it. But it's still more right-wing violence. And
not true.
It is true.
The studies are, a lot of them are rebuked.
Okay, well, the Cato one, I actually read the debunking of the Cato one. And look at the classification of a 2009 shooting, for instance, which was allegedly, according to the debunking, about a complaint about dog pee, and doesn't mention that the guy had been posting on a neo-Nazi site. Everyone is going to go to their corners on this. It is regrettable, but the truth should still matter in it. And conveniently forgetting that liberals, like President Obama, for instance, who had someone shoot into the White House where Sasha Obama was, got up to the second floor. Secret Service for like 5 days didn't even know what happened until someone discovered that there was glass remnants in there. We don't talk about that. Or the pipe bomber from 2018, who sent pipe bombs to Obama and Clinton, for instance, George Soros, et cetera, in court said motivated and radicalized by Trump. The responsibility lies with all of us, but it has to start at the top here. And I agree with Charlemagne that discussion is one that Republicans should start taking a part in if there is any way to come back together in this country.
So, number one, in terms of elections, there are people who still think George Bush is an illegitimate president. That never stopped for 8 years. It was unbelievable because of Florida. But I'm just saying,
but
in terms of legitimate elections,
conceded.
But it was nonstop, and you had people protesting from day one. Al Gore.
He didn't.
So 2020, I guess it was, wow, that's so long ago. With George Bush's first term into his second term, illegitimate president. The reason why I think this got to big news is because Melania Trump doesn't complain about anything. She really, it's very hard. Once in a while you see a press conference and she'll say something and it takes notice. So when someone who never loses it posts online. I don't think you should check with the president personally, just posts online. This guy's got to be, this is ridiculous, got to be fired. ABC's been covering for him. I cannot believe he had that joke. And people came back and said, well, why didn't you say something Thursday? Because she doesn't watch him. There's not a person who likes Donald Trump that would ever watch Jimmy Kimmel in a million years. And those people that cheer for Jimmy Kimmel have written away and emailed in order to go to Los Angeles. They wait online for 4 hours. Of course they're going to cheer everything he says. And then when you talk about funny, it doesn't mean what Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are doing. It's not a matter of my opinion they're not funny. They're not trying to be. And I'll give you an example. I'm sure you guys didn't watch The Daily Show last night with Jon Stewart. To the left, 90% of his jokes are anti-Trump, but it's funny. He's legitimately funny. He makes fun of his own party maybe 20% of the time. But you understand, it's funny, it's creative, it's interesting, the delivery's great. I watch these late night shows and I'm going, it's like a knockoff MSNBC. And I'm thinking to myself, you're not even putting the time in to get a show together. So I looked at the ratings. Colbert's getting a 2.5. Carson got an 8. Leno was getting a 6.
Gutfeld gets 3.5.
So Gutfeld's in first. Kimmel gets a 2 to a 2.5. He gets highest in the demo, and it's at 200,000. We get that at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just saying that we're not even in as many households. So it's not even my opinion that Jimmy Kimmel doesn't matter. America's saying he doesn't matter. And Melania just hearing that and acted like a human being who felt like she could have been killed and her husband could have been killed. So that's what got everyone's attention. If the president said it, I think people are like, all right. But the thing that got everyone's attention is that Melania said it, because she felt it. She's not running for election.
And she's one of the classiest people I've ever met.
Right.
Yep. But you still can't have Brendan Carr and the FCC going after people for speech that you don't like, especially a joke that he made days before the event happened.
It'd be one thing. The president being killed or dying of natural causes and the widow being happy.
Well, that's also from an Oscar Wilde play. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.